Moving on, we are going to review how to solve an equation for y. So in this type of equation, what we're actually asking you to do is to rearrange an equation. Okay, to solve for y, you're going to have both an x and a y term equal to some number. And we're going to want to isolate the y or get the y by itself. The reason we do this is because that makes it easier to graph and plot and a whole bunch of things when we know how to get it into slope-intercept form or solve it for y. So for example, let's say we have 20x plus 5y equal to 15 and we want to solve for y. Very first thing that we do is we divide our equation in half to remember what's the left side and what's the right side. This side is going to be y and this side is going to be everything else. Everything else needs to go on that side. So we start looking side to side. Well, right now, this term right here, terms are separated by plus and minus signs. This term does not have a y in it, so it needs to move. To move it, I'm going to pick it up and move it over or use its inverse operation to move it to the other side. Just like when solving an equation, the inverse operations will cancel out. But if you notice, I bring down the 5y. If you notice here, you have 15 and a negative 20x. These are not like terms, so you cannot actually subtract them. You can't combine these together. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to write them down next to each other. Do less work. Negative 20x plus 15. I usually put the x term first because of mx plus b, but it doesn't matter if you put 15 minus 20x. As long as you do not combine them, since they are not like terms, you're doing great. Again, we want to isolate the y, so right now y is next to a 5. Two things smushed together are multiplied, so the opposite is dividing. I'm going to divide each of these pieces, each and every piece of this equation, every term that's separated by a plus or minus sign. I'm going to divide it by 5. That way I have the y by itself. I would have y equal to negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. And 15 divided by 5 is 3. And that's it. We've solved this equation for y. 20x plus 5y equal to 15 is equivalent to y equal negative 4x plus 3. So you move the x term, don't combine it, then you divide by the coefficient of the x. This one is for you to try. Pause your video right now and see if you can solve this equation for y. Here's my work for this question. I looked at 3x minus 5y equal to 2 and I said, the 3x's need to be moved to the other side. So I used its inverse operation, basically dragged it across that center line, so I changed its sign. And then I realized that negative 3x and 2 are not like terms, so I can't put them together. So I just write them down next to each other, negative 3x and a positive 2. Now this is a super important moment. A lot of people miss this. What number am I left without that 3x there? Is it 5y or negative 5y? Hopefully you remembered that the negative has to come down with the 5y. That's super important because you can't just let that negative fly away. Then we continue the problem. We have negative 5y in front of y. So we're going to divide by negative 5 everywhere. Negative 3 divided by negative 5 is positive 3/5. Leave it as a fraction. And positive 2 divided by negative 5 is negative 2/5. Again, leave it as a fraction. The last question we're going to do today is still an equation that asks you to solve for y, but it is not in standard form. This is actually point-slope form, if you remember. I still need to isolate the y or get the y by itself. But the very first thing that I do when I'm solving equations is I look for distribution. That step's still the same. I'm going to distribute this 2 to both things inside there. I'd have y minus 1 equal to 2x plus 6, because 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 3 is 6. Now, again, I want everything on the y side of the equation to only have y's in it, and everything else go over here. This negative 1 right here does not have a y attached to it, so it needs to move. The opposite of subtracting 1 is to add 1. Now I need to add 1 to the other side to balance this out, but do I put the 1 underneath the 2x or underneath the 6? I put the positive 1 underneath the 6 because those are like terms. They're just regular good old-fashioned numbers. inverse operations cross that out, we'd have y equal to 2x plus 7. If there was a number in front of y, right there, I would need to divide by it. But the number right now in front of that y is a 1, and we're great. Y is by itself, so this is the solve for y version of this point-slope equation. Again, using inverse operations to move things from side to side, maybe dividing them away so that you have y by itself and slope-intercept form on the other side. We empower, we impact, we love, we are Skeeter Nation.